Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and I have with me Dan.
Hey Alex, good to be here again.
Yeah, it's unfortunately not better circumstances with an opening day loss against Villa 3-1 in the end in that one, but there were promising displays or promising signs from the game. So I'll start with your thoughts on the game. What did you make of it?
Um, Obviously disappointed to lose 3-1, but I think last week I tipped a 1-all, and that was sort of me being fairly optimistic. So it didn't surprise me too much. I was at work when the game was being played, so I was trying to follow the scores, and as we were 50, 60 minutes in, sort of thing, and it was still 1-all. I was feeling okay without actually knowing how the game was playing out. But yeah, it was disappointing to lose, but I got to see the highlights at a later point, and I think some players looked really good, and some got caught out. Whether that was they just got caught out on the day, or whether they got caught out maybe at this level, I'm not sure. We always seem to come back to the David Marshall, but he couple of mistakes, another couple of errors from him. Uh, DeVries, the new centre back. I watched the equaliser. He was standing right next to Elphick, and then took ran 2 meters away from him towards no one watching the ball, and Elphick ran straight into the middle of the 6-yard box and headed it
Yeah,
headed it in.
I
So
think Adkins was a little bit optimistic or a little bit positive when he sort of said that we lost the aerial contest there. I don't really think there was an aerial contest
no,
with
there
the
wasn't a lot
Whites.
of contest there. So but so that was I was a bit disappointed with his performance, but in saying that, Evandro was really good. Nice, one of those sort of opportunistic goals, but goals a
Do you
goal.
do you reckon he meant it? I
I
mean,
think,
it's
I mean,
it's hard to say
it
really,
was
but
one of those. I don't like. I think he just sort of was in the position, and he
just
knew the
went for it.
goalkeeper was off his line, and he sort of just had a
Yeah,
dig. It was like it was it was it was lucky, but I think there was definitely intent there.
yeah.
As with most of those sort of lucky goals, it's not many lucky goals that are like purely luck where they don't actually mean to or aren't intending to have some sort of a shot on goal. But no, Evandro, I think he looked good, and he had some apart from the goal, was involved in some good interplay. And if he stays fit, he's starting to really show. We've seen signs of it before, but he wasn't able to keep it together. If he can keep it together, he could be a real game changer for us.
The one player I haven't seen mentioned too much from a positive point of view really was Fraser Campbell. I was really surprised. I honestly, like I'd said in preseason, I thought Dicko was going to start and lead the line for us. I didn't think Campbell necessarily had the legs in him anymore, but he really surprised me. I mean, that first half display, there was a couple of balls he played through for Bowen and might have been one for Kane as well. I'm not sure
There was
where he
one
was.
for
That
Evandro that
might be the
went
one I'm
back
thinking. Yeah.
against the runner play, and Evandro just didn't quite have the legs to get there.
But yeah, he was playing some great balls and linking up really well. It's kind of frustrating that he's almost the perfect player to play with a two striker system, and whether we kind of roll the dice and put Dicko and Campbell on as starters, I don't know. Don't really have much depth beyond them, and I guess also Will Keane, but certainly a good start to the season for him.
Yeah, it was. And I think the key, he made mention of it himself in some interviews in preseason. I think the key has been that he's actually had a preseason. He came in last year, and I think he's about 5 or 6 kilos lighter or something ridiculous this year than he was at like the same time last season.
Yep.
It's so I think that's just being able to actually be with the team and have had the full preseasons done him the world of good. Bowen, I mean, we've been talking about just hoping that he can keep doing what he was doing last season, and I mean, so far he looked like he's still got the same endeavour and the same drive. So that's good to see. Um, Todd Kane, for a player who's essentially playing out of position, was was great.
Yeah, that was
Uh,
a really surprising one. I didn't know he could play on the left.
yeah, and Dan Batty getting the nod in the centre of the park and did really well as well. So there was plenty of positives to take out of a defeat on the opening weekend, and that's the thing. It is only game one of what is it, a 46 game season or something like. There's there's plenty of opportunity to build and plenty of time to get the wins that we need. So
And that's it. And I think, going in at half time, I was actually thinking that there were no negatives in the team. 1-1 at half time. Yeah, you say Device probably at fault for the goal that they got. But in the first few minutes, he played a lovely through ball. I don't know if it made the highlights. He played a lovely through ball pretty much onto the chest of, I think it was Bowen, or it might have been Evandro, I'm not too sure, but it was just the same as what he'd done in pre-season against Newcastle, where he's shown that he's got a great ball on him, sort of in the same mold as a Dawson or a Maguire. So you take the good with the bad. He's a young kid, first game in a foreign country, first game with that back four, still learning the game. So you cut him a little bit of slack in that sense. Second half, yeah, Marshall really let himself down with that goal that El Mohammadi then scored. Um, but there was a lot of positives in the team. Lehigh looked great at right back. Kingsley didn't look as bad as he had last season either, so he was quite promising as well. Milinkovic, when he came on, looked quite dangerous and looked quite promising. There were a couple of chances where Henriksen could have either gone the shot himself or if he'd played a slightly better ball for, I think it was Milinkovic, then could have got it back to 3-2 late in the game as well. So I saw it commented, I think, before the Villa game that it's a very young squad in general, apart from Lehigh, Marshall, and Campbell, I think, and Evandro. So if we are going to have a good season, it's not going to be that we hit the ground running with three straight wins to the top of the table. It's going to be more of the Millwall sort of season from last season, where they kind of started off as people probably expected them to do, and then they really grew into the season, and the squad really sort of gelled and got going. So, as we speak, it's the final day of the transfer window over there. Hopefully, we can bring in another striker, definitely, maybe another wide player, I'm not sure. But other than that, and maybe a fullback, I don't know. But other than that, the squad's actually looking pretty promising. There's a lot of potential there if the players can sort of gel and settle and really come together as a squad because um, it seems at the moment every season we're kind of rotating half the starting 11 out of the team, out of the club, really. So if we can kind of keep this group together, whether it's this season or next season, hopefully there are some pretty decent signs there of things to come. Um, I guess the difficult decision to make for next game, and we'll talk about the upcoming games in a little bit, but the obvious comment or the obvious sort of opinion at the moment on the squad seems to be that Device and Marshall should be rotated out of the side. I guess the question for you, Dan, would be with the League Cup game coming up, that seems a better opportunity to me to sort of experiment with with Long as keeper, as with, McDonald potentially at centre back. Would it make more sense from your point of view to maybe keep an unchanged lineup just to let the players get a bit more game time together and not kind of rip the confidence out of someone like a Device straight away?
yeah, I think that's the smarter move. Like as just said before, like and we it's just it's the first weekend. Like I don't think it's the time to panic. We've Adkins has picked what he thinks on the weekend, what he thinks is the best 11. And as you've made mention, there's plenty of guys in that team who don't have a lot of experience in the championship. We need to give them a little bit of time to get that experience and to um, settle into this level of football and settle in as a team. So I think I wouldn't expect to see any changes this weekend unless obviously something happened in training or whatever. But I don't think there'd be many changes. But in saying that, it's also how long does Adkins go if these players continue to make mistakes? So it is a bit of a balance, but I don't see any changes for this weekend. I think I agree with what you said that the cup tie against Sheffield Wednesday will be Sheffield United will be a much better opportunity to make some changes.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And I think if there's a couple of players who really stand out against United in the cup, it's a lot less damaging to a player's mentality if you say, well, for instance, Long's had a blinder in goal against United in the cup. He'll come into the team for the next league game. It's not necessarily dropping Marshall, it's promoting Long. I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't played obviously at a professional level. I don't know if that really makes a difference to a player's mentality. But I would think instead of saying to say Device, well, you've played against Villa, but you're not in the team against Wednesday because you had a shocking debut. I don't know what that does to him the next time he plays. But if you're instead saying, oh, McDonald was great at centre back, we're going to give him a go, it's just a little bit different for the player.
yeah, I think that's obviously one of the hardest things about, or would be one of the most difficult things about management would be try finding the best way to essentially to cut a player from the starting 11. And I think you're right that being able to say, well, whether it's Long or McDonald or whoever it is, and say, well, you know, they played themselves into the starting 11 with their performance the other night. I think that's a better way than saying you've played yourself out of the starting 11.
Yeah, agreed. Um, so a term that you used earlier we'll use to sort of step into a broader discussion. You talked about no need to panic at this stage of the season, and it is just one game gone. And I wanted to sort of talk to you about this mood or sentiment, I guess, that's been sort of spreading amongst City fans on social media in general, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is. Not to single out particular people or entities or whatever. It's just a sort of a general malaise, I guess you could say, amongst City supporters and a real sense of worry already that we're basically doomed to relegation to League One. And I guess I wanted to get your take on, I mean, you've already sort of expressed it's one game in a 46 game season. Um, what your sort of message for supporters would be in terms of trying to stay positive or optimistic about the season, because as we've touched on already, it does seem like it was quite a promising start to the game. Everything sort of dropped off in the second half, but I guess it's sort of important to some extent that the supporters stay positive.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, it's a hard one to sort of express, but I don't think I always for everything that I've always been involved in, I just always support 100%. Like I get frustrated as much as everyone else does with things, especially with what's going on behind the scenes at City with the alums selling and not selling and not investing and blaming everyone and everything but themselves and all of that. But like I'm not got a great track record. I'm also a Coast Mariners fan, so I know what's going like like their club in strife as well. But
For our UK listeners, the club that Mike Phelan's now involved with,
yes, he's just taken on the or whatever technical director role or something, I think. But
running Usain Bolt through his paces.
yeah, let's not talk about that. Um, yeah, so I mean, everyone is going to approach this situation with their own experience and everything in mind. But I think the best thing that any of us can do is that we just need to rally as much as we can behind the club, and that doesn't necessarily mean that in doing that we are supporting the decisions that are being made by the club. I think it's more about saying to the players that have signed onto the club and saying that we love this club. We don't necessarily love what's happening there. Um, and I think there's been some of the protests and the things that are happening in England. Like there is a place for those, absolutely. That I mean, you need to make your message somehow. You need to get it out there. And some of the demonstrations, um, I'm I'm happy to agree with. Some of them maybe not so much, but um, I just I don't know. I think generally I would just say that we should just be supporting the players and supporting the team, regardless of the background noise.
Absolutely, and there's obviously a range of factors in why people aren't able to go to games anymore. It does seem the game on the weekend was officially our lowest ever home attendance for a season opener, I think, since the KCOM's opened. And of course, it's been well publicized the lack of concessions for both senior members of society as well as for junior members. People just basically acting on principle and saying, well, if these people can't attend games, I want to attend games, and we're not sitting here condemning that at all. As you say, there is that element of trying to support the team through everything, and you see some comments where people saying, well, if you're supporting the team, you're sort of supporting the regime and everything that goes with it. And I do think that's slightly harsh and it's slightly unfair because, one of our most famous chants and one of the chants that we've used in the protests is "City till we die," and that sort of rings hollow if you're going to turn around and say, well, I'm City up until this point, and then I'm going to abandon the team. And we want the ownership to change as much as the next person, and I will be incredibly happy and incredibly excited when new owners walk through the doors. That is, with a slight hesitation, I say that because you do have to look at just what happened to Villa last season and how close they came to administration in the off season under this supposedly spectacular new owner. So you look at Reading, who are owned now by the brother and sister who were so close to taking us over, and they're not suddenly, challenging for promotion and having all these wonderful things happen to them. So
You
that,
might only even have to go a few years back into City's history to when the Allams saved Hull City from
well,
their
exactly,
financial issues,
exactly, and
and
we were over the moon when they came in.
everyone was very supportive when that first happened, and they took us. I mean, they took us to the Premier League. So let's not forget that they have done some things for the club, but obviously the last few seasons, I'm not going to disagree with the vast majority that the
Yeah,
decision making's been self-serving.
yeah, and so I think that's sort of the point that we're at, which is we want the Allams to sell the club, but we do want it to go to a good home, as to use their own words, really. And it is good to see. I mean, with a touch of cynicism, we look at the fact that there's an article out today that the honorary vice president of the club is out looking for new owners, and he was the one who got the club in touch with prospective Chinese owners a little while ago. So we do look on that with optimism, with a dose of cynicism about the timing of it, with the window coming up to the closing today and the low attendance figure that got announced. So I mean, look, it's a really difficult topic. We were sort of talking before we started recording about how difficult it is because you can't sit here and condemn anyone for their decisions and um, the way that they want to support the club. So that's not what we're doing. It's just a very interesting topic and really seems to be on the forefront of everyone's minds at the moment, particularly after the result, particularly after the crowd number, the transfer negotiations, all those sorts of things. Everyone's quite focused on, um, you know, where the club is going, and sort of what can be done to improve things. So it's a really tough one, and um, I don't know what the answer is really. I think we don't really know what the answer is, and there's nothing that can really be done unless, like I was sort of saying to you the other day, look, unless one of us sort of buys the club from the owners, there's nothing practical that we can really do other than again and again and again make the point known that we want them to leave. So, up to a point you do that before you realize perhaps you're just yelling at a brick wall, and then you either whether it's you're watching the games from home on TV, I mean, which is what we do. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either. But if you're still connected to the team, if you're still supporting the team, I just feel like that's the main thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. As I said, like you can't do anything. We really can't do anything except for support the team. And if we're the supporters, then that's our job pretty much. So
And some unfortunate news that I've just been seeing in the last few minutes. It looks like Cardiff are trying to buy Marcus Henriksen, which would be an interesting one. It looks like we're valuing him at £6 million, so I guess it'll be an interesting start to the transfer window deadline day if that were to happen. It would be a bit unfortunate given he's just been named captain. Um, but who knows? Expect the unexpected, I guess, at this stage of the window, especially when City's concerned. But we'll look ahead now to the two games we've got coming up against both Sheffield clubs. We've got Wednesday on the weekend in the league, and then United midweek next week on the Wednesday in the cup. I think the Wednesday game is the first game to be shown on Tigers TV, which will be exciting for us here in Australia. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it all goes off without a hitch. Um, Wednesday are another club that you could look at and say, well, they've had a really tumultuous off season. So we've sort of started with a grand tour of them with Villa in the first game and now Wednesday. They lost to Wigan in the first game. They were really sort of battered by Wigan by all extent, by all reports. And they've got a few off-season off-pitch issues as well with players being investigated for brawls, transfer embargo, all sorts of things. So it's it's an interesting game from that perspective that it's quite hard to pick which team's coming in worse shape, really.
Yeah, some of this I mean, I haven't really followed too much of the news from the championship as a whole and the other and what's going on with the other clubs. So it was quite interesting little note that when I was reading up on that for tonight. So um, yeah, I think I mean you always every time you come up against a team that is down, you're always looking at as an opportunity for you to be able to, for us to be able to move in the right direction. We just have to be mindful that you know you got to be don't want to. These are the games that can really trip you up if you're not if you don't go in giving Wednesday the respect that they do deserve.
Yeah, so it'll be an interesting one because they've still got a strong team, and that's the interesting thing out of this is that they've got this transfer embargo, but because of that, you would expect, well, they might have a fire sale, they'll sell players to raise funds, but it seems as if in the off season, a lot of clubs have been lowballing them offers, thinking that they'll get desperate and get a bargain. But they've still got basically all of their team that really took them to the playoff final a couple of years ago against us. So they've still got Forestieri and a couple of others like that. So it's a really dangerous team and not a game that we can really go into just sort of expecting to walk over them, especially away at their place. We've already sort of touched on the fact that we probably wouldn't make any changes to the team. I mean, if I was to look at the side and make any sorts of positive changes, I mean, not really dropping anyone from a lack of effort. Potentially, you bring Milinkovic in for a start, but again, it's a really tough one because I don't know what you do with Kane in that case. Whether you put Kane at left back, I don't know if he can play there, but if he could, that might be the only change I'd make. It'd be good to get a few more attacking players on the pitch, and especially from the new bunch of players to kind of give them a bit more of a run with the team.
Yeah, I suppose it just depends on where, say, for if you use Milinkovic as an example, where his fitness is up to, and whether that's the reason that he hasn't started or didn't start on the weekend. If that's the case, if he's deemed fit enough to start, is despite how well Kane is playing, is it preferential to have a natural left winger in that position? And I'd say it probably is, and I think Kane did an outstanding job there on the weekend, but I think Milinkovic being a naturally attacking player is going to bring a little bit more to us in that dimension of the pitch.
And do you have a score prediction for this one?
Oh, I haven't even thought about it, but I'll be optimistic. I'll go for a 1-0, 1-0 to City.
Well, I got my tip right last week. Almost got the score prediction right, in fact. I went with a 2-1 Villa win. It was 3-1 in the end. I might go with a 1-1 draw in this one. I feel like we had a fair few 1-1 draws over the pre-season, so it seems our favourite scoreline at the moment. I reckon we can get something out of this, and you might be right. We might be able to take all 3 points. At the moment, I'm a little bit pessimistic about our chances of keeping a clean sheet, but who knows? 1-1 or 1-0 would be certainly a decent point or 3 points away from home to sort of kick things off. Um, and then we play the other Sheffield club during the week in the League Cup. And I mean, I say this every year, but I can never not be excited about the cups. I always love a good cup run, and I think that stems from the FA Cup run in, well, back in 08, 09, and then also in 13, 14. So I, whether it's the League Cup or the FA Cup, League Cup semi-finals a couple of years ago as well. So it's always fun to go on a bit of a run, and you never know. You get to the third, fourth round, suddenly you draw a, Liverpool or even a Newcastle or someone like that, just to get, a bit of a taste of the Premier League back is always a bit of fun. So I hope we take it seriously. Sheffield United have kind of had a bit of a surprising start. They had their loss to Swansea on the opening day, which I guess you wouldn't be too surprised at. But then a 3-0 loss to Borough is, a loss necessarily isn't unexpected, but to lose 3-0 is a pretty poor way to start with two losses already on the board. So potentially a chance there to really sort of give a bit of rotation, give the kids a bit of a chance, but still really make our mark on them.
Yeah, I I'm always a fan of the cup games. I think like you got a squad. You can only play 11 players, and you got a 4-man squad or whatever it is. Like they're footballers. They need to play to, and it's hard to get them all in like every week or through the season and stuff. So through the league. So the cups are great, and you should take every game as it comes, but take every game as serious as you can or you need to. So I think it's a good opportunity to, as you say, give some other players their opportunity, some of the other new players, or some of the players that maybe have just
Like a Kevin
right on.
Stewart, perhaps, as well.
Yeah, some of those guys that maybe are right on the edge of that first 11 but can't quite crack, or and even some of those young kids that have either just are on their first contracts and stuff. I think someone like uh, Brandon Fleming
Yeah,
potentially
yeah, yeah.
may come in. He's a promising young left back. I think that they've
We seem to keep churning out left backs at the moment. The
yeah
last few couple of prospects have been left backs.
we've had a few of them over the last couple of years. So but there's a couple of guys there that are in and around the squad that are on their I think that first professional contract and in with the big boys now. So I think some of those should get will probably get a run. And Long will almost definitely start in goal. Um, I think you'll probably see you'll see McDonald come in. I don't know whether they'll bring in whether they'll change the back line completely. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure on what the options are across that back line. But you're right. Someone like Stewart will probably come into the midfield. You got, I think, Keane may start
Yeah, and
up
Irvine
top.
might be fit by
Oh
then as
yeah,
well to
if
have a go.
Irvine's over his
If
bug,
over
he
his
was on the.
illness, he might get a
Mm,
chance in midfield. And Grzycki, even if he's still, if by the end of today
yeah,
he's still with
if
us.
well, that's the thing. I mean, he missed a lot of preseason. That's the only
Yeah,
thing. But yeah, it's not that long ago that he was. I mean, he played at the World Cup, so that's why sort of he missed our preseason because he was still playing only. When was the World Cup? A month ago.
yeah, it was
Like
pretty quickly.
so. I think he's definitely got to be in contention to get some game time in that cup match if he's deemed fit enough. If he lasts until I think it's 2 a.m. for us this morning in the morning or something. The window
I
closes.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Normally it finishes at what, midnight their time, so
Yeah.
we get the last few hours in our morning. But yeah, it closes at
It's
5 p.m., so that's 2 a.m. our time. So we'll wake up
yeah.
and hopefully still have a few decent players.
Yeah. Hopefully we haven't cleared house just yet. Yeah, but I think both these games that we've got in the coming week, we can get both wins. Whether we do is another story, but I think I'm confident that we can, with a nice run of a few games now, we'll start to build into. So we'll start to see what the squad that Adkins has assembled is really capable of.
Absolutely, be very interesting. So do you have a score prediction for this one?
Oh, I should have gone 1-0 in the cup and done something else in the other one, but I don't know. I, I want us to win, but I just don't know. Does the League Cup have replays?
Oh, that's a good question actually. I know that they've traditionally had penalty shootouts, so I think it's still penalty shootouts. I have
Okay.
a feeling one of the cups has changed something around. I lose track of whether or not there's replays in
Yeah.
various things, but I'm almost positive this one would go to penalties.
Okay. Um, then I have to pick a
Us-
result.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have a feeling it could go to penalties, so I don't know if that's enough of a result, but hey, what better way to introduce yourself as Kevin Long than or is it oh gosh, I should probably get his name right, shouldn't I? George
George Long?
Long. Yes, that's right, not Kevin Long. Uh, well, that's even more reason to introduce yourself so I know your name properly. But if he could win us a penalty shootout on debut, it would be pretty impressive.
It certainly would. Everyone loves a keeper who can save penalties. So,
Yeah, well,
um,
that's how Yak really redeemed his reputation with us, wasn't it?
yeah, it's a bit of magic. But and I think that's the thing with the cup. You always find a little bit of magic in the cup.
There's always magic in the cup, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Dan.
Not a problem.
And thank you everyone for listening in. Hopefully, we can have a bit more of a positive week this week with a couple of wins. And until next time, come on, City! You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
This is on fire. We're going higher and higher. There's no turning back 'cause you're out.